So to start off Raw, we had a super intense promo by CM Punk. One might even call it, I guess, a pipe bomb towards the end, with certain comments, it seems like, directed towards certain figures and certain booking decisions that we just kind of reflected over in a massive kind of, I think, collective WTF moment. You know, it seems like CM Punk wanted to kind of capitalize on that as well, because I do think, while this seemed like a really maybe good intentioned promo and stuff like that, to me at the end of the day it does feel like kind of now, Reigns and Punk's opportunity to try to rein back the spotlight of WrestleMania back on their feud, with kind of maybe firing shots and doing things that will kind of take them across the edge comparatively to what we just saw on Friday with Pat McAfee returning to be essentially the one of the inner voices in Randy's circle who convinced him to go heel. Great. With that, Punk kind of, tongue-in-cheek in a fun way, kind of goes off the wall essentially on how, he obviously has a disdain for Pat, calls him Pat McAfee, obviously talking about his political alignment and how he probably isn't the biggest fan of it, and, that popped the fuck out of me because I completely agree. I'm not the biggest fan of Pat, politically, or as a personality. I do think, he's done a lot for the NFL. Obviously, he's a legend of a player, so not gonna ever take that away from him. But, I do not see kind of his involvement in the WWE as additive as, I guess, TKO kind of likes to believe, which was CM Punk's kind of point further down the line in this promo, and, in pointing out that, Pat McAfee was back to help Randy Orton, that, this was a boneheaded move essentially by TKO, and looking through the Rolodex of guys they needed to bring back to drum up interest, and, also then shoots fire at them for their ticket prices and starts, or starts to talk about lowering the ticket prices so that the families, in Houston, which they were for Raw this past Monday, so that the families can be here to see CM Punk, whip Reigns' ass on or at Mania or wherever they may be. Really good face promo that he kind of uses under the guise of like his kind of Punk character to kind of throw the woes and disdains that we as fans have directly towards the management, which does feel extremely cathartic. Will these things really amount to anything else, or is this really kind of like more of Punk just kind of trying to inject life into the feud, into their feud, which is doing extremely well, but just to capitalize on the punctuation that was the craziness and chaos of Pat McAfee returning. I think him leaning towards especially the ticket price part of the end of the rant, once he kind of threw off the Raw logo on the microphone and kind of went full pipe bomb with it. I do appreciate some sort of acknowledgement by somebody that there is an obvious change and in the ethos of what WWE is, and especially since CM Punk, which he mentioned eloquently in his promo, he left kind of on his own terms and kind of has come back on his own terms. He kind of does have the grounds to kind of stand on that and talk about that kind of openly and candidly, which, props to whoever was doing this segment, and props to whoever's currently kind of running Raw, I think in counterpart to SmackDown, just because it does feel like Raw is the more kind of thoughtful show, and it's always seemed to be that way kind of moving forward in this Netflix era. There have been obviously some stinkers, and you all have probably heard me talk about them, but I do think that this segment in particular, hats off to Punk obviously for being masterful with it, pointing out more his the allegiance of Pat, turning Randy heel is that TKO heelish mindset, which you can respectfully, I guess, have him talk about in the world of wrestling without it feeling too necessarily unprofessional or somehow like this, like just out of line, if that makes sense. It's technically it is, but like this is CM Punk's character, so respectfully for him not to even address these things or ever to really talk about it, especially while he's on top, would be the antithesis of his character. I'm glad they're kind of recognizing. I think they've done that a lot in him and Reigns in terms of like allowing Punk to really poke and prod at Reigns' character and stuff, and them to reference the Cabana podcast and all these things and stuff. But I really do think that this is kind of the cherry on top, especially with, I think, the terrible booking decision of having Pat McAfee, be, part of the main event, a kind of, WrestleMania show. I don't think they're going to really address much of this pipe bomb moving forward. In the same way that essentially they took away the press conferences, they took away a lot of the user or fan input based things that allowed for that unfiltered kind of unchecked vision to happen because of like fan interest and what the fans say. You know what I mean? You kind of know that they don't necessarily want to listen to what we have to say, but they are considering how we feel necessarily to see if they can fit it within their vision. With this acquisition over time, these characteristics we're finding out are not, wrestling is not immune to, so I do think a character like Punk, especially when he's built upon, he's a very anti-establishment character, and a lot of wrestling is built on those anti-establishment heroes. It is going to be an interesting kind of next couple of years, especially for Punk, if he wants to be extremely prevalent, for example, and stand for what he stands for. And the biggest obvious, I think, point of hypocrisy people would most likely point to is definitely the Cena feud earlier in 25, kind of, where he went to fight essentially Cena at Saudi, where they essentially they made a meta feud of essentially CM Punk's morals, and it felt kind of disgusting, kind of, in a way, especially when Cena was talking about that being one of his favorite moments like ever wrestling. And it's like I can kind of see, I think, where he's coming from in terms of like, CM Punk really essentially doing a 180 on how he carries business and stuff like that, maybe. But beyond that, like the principles of what Punk was like tweeting about necessarily, while it was some passive aggressiveness at Miz, is still essentially real injustices affecting people. And it's not necessarily like, Cena's in the wrong, or these wrestlers are in the wrong, or Miz is in the wrong necessarily for then also working under the regime, because that is maybe their way of like trying to, show and expose the youth and things there, our culture, and to cross culture there. It's that kind of paradigm that exists. And obviously, I think that is kind of also reflected in this CM Punk pipe bomb promo that you see right now, where CM Punk is the champion right now, main eventing his second consecutive WrestleMania on an awesome comeback kind of tour that has had him have some of his best feuds, matches, and promos to date. But it's kind of under a regime where, yeah, Vince might be gone, who he was someone that he had a disdain for, but the company itself is more of a reflection of a lot of the things that he would be distasteful of and disapprove of now with the TKO acquisition than ever before, really. But obviously there's a myriad of differences, colleagues, families, and equity and community built within within his wrestling world that is obviously a factor into all of that than simply the relationship he had with a working company called WWE, which is a lot. But I just do think that it's just such an interesting time for him to cut such a promo in that way, where it does at this point feel like kind of poking and prodding the stick, and it not really going to stir anything up, but it just kind of does feel like a reminder of who CM Punk kind of is, and in my opinion was, at least. I feel like, especially in this era where we're having such a disconnect, I think, especially from the really hardcore audience and WWE and the casual audience, due to all of this stuff, CM Punk being able to really kind of wrap that all around and cut a promo like this is really fun, and it allows us all to kind of reflect on what has been happening and everything so far, so maybe they will lower the ticket prices and stuff, and maybe this promo will do actually something. But at the end of the day, I do think maybe it's cynical of me to think in this way, but it is kind of part of Punk's brand to always appear and rally a kind of as an anti-establishment within the establishment, kind of like a Kendrick Lamar type of thing. I know it might seem like a weird comparison, but if you know, you know. I just had to kind of speak on that because I thought the promo was really interesting, and it was a really, really fun way to start the show, despite the rest of the show being kind of formulaic. I mean, like, you know, I do think that this, like I've said in a lot of my videos, you know, the booking and everything in this last couple of years of WWE, as someone who's been watching every week, you know, it does feel kind of bipolar at points, and like, not just, it doesn't feel as if I can be excited for the health of wrestling itself, you know what I mean? And it just does feel like WWE is becoming more corporatized. So I do hope that, you know, that acknowledgement in the CM Punk Pipebomb promo, because like that's not something that, you know, isn't under the watch of TKO, right? So there's an acknowledgement there by somebody at least, you know, so that you would hope that there will be more amends that are consumer friendly for the longtime fans of wrestling, hopefully moving down the line. That's really kind of my point with all of this, and kind of the essence of that CM Punk promo is that I'm hoping that it's not just, you know, Punk appeasing to that character that people kind of adore him for, you know, and hopefully it is kind of some sort of undercurrent of change, them seeing that they have to, you know, really sell WrestleMania tickets, you know, and get on the Rolodex to call Pat McAfee, you know what I mean, and all these guys. So we'll see. Once again, just another amazing kind of promo on this build to WrestleMania. I think we've had, like we always do, like the talent always goes as hard as they can because they know where they are in the position they're given, because they feel it and they're the ones feeling the fans, you know. So always kind of hoping the best for them, hoping the best for CM Punk and Reigns at Mania. Should be a really fun match, probably going to be some super theatric wrestling going on, a lot of moving parts maybe, you know, than just a simple one-on-one match. We'll see. What you guys kind of think about Punk's pipe bomb, you know, if it was a pipe bomb to you. It feels like we kind of have lost the plot in terms of our own input. I mean, we're seeing jelly roll matches, you know what I mean? Speed kind of, even though Speed and Jelly Roll have done excellent jobs, and in the space that they're given, they're taking it completely seriously. It's the premise and the plot that's kind of terrible that we're giving this time to, and when it could go to the rest, like the fact that it seems like Ilya and Mello are kind of have been carrying like most of the shows the whole year, and then are now kind of being on the back burner. I guess that's going to be a story, because it seems like, you know, with how Unreal works and how WWE is now all working, all these last minute and dumb decisions are a ploy on purpose to make some weird reality TV show. And maybe that's a whole nother video, but yeah, just for now we'll just keep it to the Punk pipe bomb. But just super interesting to think about, and I kind of do hope that there's more of a comeback to that 2024 where it was quasi meta, but it was to serve the storytelling we were getting, not to simply, you know, make Unreal or to book specifically for each venue night to night, you know what I mean? Like, we can't be, that to me just doesn't scream long-term viability. But I'm not even, I'm a dude with a green screen and a mic, right? You know, that's just an opinion I have. But we'll see what happens, you know, what comes from this promo, what ramifications there might be, or if like there will even be a retaliation maybe by Reigns to the promo, you know. We'll see. So let me know what you guys kind of think, and I'll see you in the next video.